Hey guys, welcome back to Supposedly Fun. I am Greg, here today to talk to you about a new long-term reading project that I'm going to be working on. I have one of my little buddies right here. She's panting because she's been outside yelling at people. So if you hear a dog, that's why. She's right here. Um, anyway, but before I get into the new project, I wanted to say thank you because a lot of people have been very supportive of my Pride stash. I've gotten a lot of compliments. A couple of people just generally don't like mustaches, and that's fine. Interestingly, most of those people are women, and I'm sorry, ladies, but I'm not out to impress you. I'm thinking I may keep it a little bit longer than Pride Month, just because it's a different look for me. So anyway, thank you for all of your support. I appreciate it. So my new long-term reading project is that I want to read all of the Pulitzer Prize winning books for fiction. This is something I've been thinking about for a long time, actually. I think about it and then I look at how many of the winners there are and I immediately run away. And then I think about it again and kind of want to come back to it, and it's this whole vicious cycle. And what I think is finally getting me to the point where I want to commit to doing it is that I've commented a little bit with Kelly over at Books I'm Not Reading. I will link her profile down below. She has done this project. She has read all of the Pulitzer Prize winners for fiction. She had some good wisdom for it. And talking to her kind of got the juices flowing, however you want to say it, that's not gross. It got me thinking about it, and I think the idea of it as a long-term project made it more appealing to me, because it's not like I want to read them all back to back to back, and it's not like I'm putting a timeline on myself. I don't want to have it done by the end of the year. I'm not saying I have to have it done by the end of next year. It's kind of like my current reading goal, where I want to read more books that are kind of inclusive or feature representation of bisexual, lesbian, or transgender characters or authors, and it's just something that I can work on as I go about my reading life and keep in mind, and maybe pull from these books when I need something to read. So originally the prize was called the Pulitzer Prize for the novel. It was changed to the Pulitzer Prize for fiction. Under the name Pulitzer Prize for the novel, there were 27 winners. Under the fiction title, there have been 62 winners. So that's a lot of books. I have only read 28, although Kelly says that is more than she had read when she started, so I've been in a pretty good place. Most of those books come from the last 20 years. So I think I got a head start just for the fact that I was working in a bookstore, and when a book won the Pulitzer, I'd kind of read it. So I've read 28, most of them from the last 20 years. So I think this is good too, because it's really going to force me to read some authors that I've been saying I want to read for a long time, and that's going to be fun. I have already gotten the first book that won the Pulitzer, which is His Family by Ernest Poole. And this book actually shaped the way I'm going to approach this. By the way, this book was not easy to get, because you would think it would be easy because there's actually no copyright on this book. However, it is not an easy book to find. I went to the library, they could not get a copy for me. I went to 2 independent bookstores in town, and they could not procure a copy. The only place I could get a copy was Amazon. And this is why I say I do not like shopping at Amazon, but occasionally I exhaust all of my local resources and have to turn to them, and here we are. So the reason this ended up shaping the way I'm going to approach this project is when I was talking to Kelly, she said she picked books at random. She didn't go in order, and that was how I thought I wanted to do it. But when I was looking at this book, I'll read you the description of this book on Wikipedia, and we all know Wikipedia is a wonderful scholarly site, but go with me on this. When Poole's first novel, The Harbor, came out in 1915, it was a critical and popular success, but the Pulitzer Prize did not yet exist. When his second novel, His Family, came out in 1918, the consensus is that it's the lesser of the two works, and that the Pulitzer Committee was really honoring Poole for The Harbor. Well, that hit me pretty hard, struck me as interesting, so it completely changed the way I want to approach this project. So, interestingly, when I went into one of those independent bookstores in town to find this is hard to find, but they had The Harbor by Ernest Poole. And Penguin had released an edition of this book, and I read the back, and it sounds, not only does it sound interesting, but it actually sounds like it ties in with a lot of the first winners of the Pulitzer Prize. So I'm making things much more complicated for myself. I'm going to start my project probably next month, because I want to finish the books that I prioritized for Pride Month in June. So in July, I'm probably going to start this project by reading both of these books and comparing them, because I think it's interesting, this idea that he won a Pulitzer for this because of this, and because the Pulitzer Prize did not exist when this book is published. That may come back, because some of Willa Cather's most famous novels were written before the Pulitzer Prize existed, but she won in 1923 for her book One of Ours, which is one of her lesser known books. So I think that's going to be an interesting idea to keep in mind. And then, because I was looking at these initial winners, I noticed some themes among them. There are a lot of books that are concerned with industrialization and unionization, and there are a lot of books that are concerned with the drastic social changes that happened because of the Industrial Revolution. And I think that's really fascinating. And if you take these books together, I think it could paint a much more interesting or much more complete portrait of what was going on in society at that time, and maybe why these books were deemed to be culturally significant and or like award worthy, however you want to put it. So, and again, interestingly, that comes into play with these two books. So, The Harbor is about Billy, an aspiring writer struggling to reconcile his sympathy for the working man with his middle class allegiance to capitalist progress. And it's about the New York waterfront. So this is really heavily about industrialization, unionization, capitalism, a lot of those really heavy economic forces in America. His family is much more about social. I don't know if it's about social change, but it is much more of a domestic picture of America. I think the drastic social changes come with the second book that won a Pulitzer, which I got in a used bookstore in town, The Magnificent Ambersons by Booth Tarkington. So this book is a dynasty spanning 3 generations. The Ambersons' preeminence as society's elite is threatened, not only by a hungry new breed of industrial entrepreneur, but from its own arrogance and greed. So if you look at these books in total, so no award was given the 3rd year after the prize was created, but then it goes to The Age of Innocence, which is ostensibly a love story, but also really talks about the drastic changes in New York society that were happening because of the Industrial Revolution, because these quote-unquote new money people were coming up and challenging the people who were at the upper echelons of New York society. So then you have Alice Adams, again by Booth Tarkington, which centers on the idea of a young woman who wants to climb the social ladder. So I was looking at these books and I was thinking, I gotta read them in order. So yes, I'm making it harder for myself, but I think the nerd in me is really interested in this idea of getting a cross-section of society at the time these books were published, and helping myself get an idea of why these books were deemed to be important. And I think it's gonna be interesting to see how that changes over time, because obviously now we don't have a whole lot of books about industrialization or unionization. Although, interestingly, you could argue that we're kind of going through, like 100 years later, the first prize was given in 1918. Arguably, we are going through a time of great industrial change, because back then we were going from farming to like factories. And now factories tend to be dying, and we're going to this more digital age, or a lot of the industrial stuff is getting farmed out to other countries. So it's happening again, and I think that could be really interesting. But we're not really rewarding books that have to do with that at this time, particularly. So I don't know. I'm thinking before I actually get into the project, and that's always a dangerous thing to do. But I think it's going to be interesting to see how these topics that are deemed important change over time, and how they're maybe relevant today. Because, like I said, 100 years later, we are actually concerned about a lot of the same things. I thought it would be fun, since this is my video announcing the project, to talk about, just like do a wild guess which book I have not read yet that I'm going to enjoy the most, and which book I think I will enjoy the least. So I looked through, and don't mind me, I have my computer here with the list, so I'm going to kind of scroll through. I don't really know why, but I have always had this idea that I'm really going to like The Good Earth by Pearl S. Buck. So that's one reason that I like the idea of this project, because it's going to force me to finally read it. And hopefully soon, because that was the Pulitzer Prize winner for 1932. So it's not that far off from these two. So I have a weird suspicion, and that I can't quite explain, that I'm going to like The Good Earth by Pearl S. Buck. Another one that I already own. I bought this a while ago because I stumbled upon it in my favorite bookstore, which is Northshire Books in Vermont. It's fantastic. If you're ever in the area, I definitely recommend it. It's wonderful. Anyway, I was there and I saw this, The Keepers of the House by Shirley Ann Grau. And I had never heard of this, but Vintage had put out this new edition of it, which is really pretty. This is a book about the Howlands, who have been on their land since the early 1800s. Now, for just 7 generations, they've been pillars of their southern community. and extraordinary family lore has been passed down to Abigail Howland, but not all of it. So it's about shocking facts that come to life. It deals with slavery, and I think by the time you get to the 1960s, which is when this was published and won, you also have To Kill a Mockingbird, won the same decade. So I think by the time we get to the middle 1900s, we're going to be shifting away from industrialization to a little bit more race-conscious books. It's going to be... I'm actually really intrigued by how this is going to shape out. But I think this is another book that I'm going to enjoy. Clearly, I bought a copy of it. I just haven't gotten around to reading it. So, which one will I enjoy the least? If you've watched any of my other Pulitzer Prize videos, you know I feel like I need to read John Updike to have a complete view of literature, and he's a two-time winner. So I'm not convinced I'm going to like those. But I think the book I'm actually going to like the least is something I'm going to be doing kind of like how I want to read The Harbor to get a complete view of the picture. So in 1974, no award was given because the Pulitzer jury recommended Gravity's Rainbow by Thomas Pynchon. Pynchon? I don't know how to say it. But point is, that was the book that they nominated. The board refused to award it. So I feel like in order to be a completist, I'm going to need to read Gravity's Rainbow. And that is a book I have wildly resisted reading for a long time. And I'm not sure I'm going to like it. But we'll find out. But then again, in 1977, there were two nominees and no award was given. One of them is Roots by Alex Haley. I would like to read that, so I think I'm going to hold myself to that. And the other was A River Runs Through It by Norman Maclean, which is going to be really interesting because so that book is set in the area where I live now. And I've seen the movie, but it would be interesting to read the book. Point just being, I think John Updike is probably going to be the one that I like the least. Although, if we're including books that did not actually win, possibly Gravity's Rainbow. Another one I am going to kind of single out is Dragon's Teeth by Upton Sinclair. So this is a part of a series of books that Upton Sinclair wrote. They're called the World's End series. They feature a character named Lanny Budd. I don't quite understand this series. So basically, Lanny Budd is the son of an American arms manufacturer who moves in the confidence of world leaders. So in each book, he's like traveling the world, meeting all these big figures. And the idea is that he's not simply witnessing events, but often propelling them. So Dragon's Teeth, it was published in what year? 1942. In Germany to visit relatives, Lanny Budd encounters a disturbing atmosphere of hatred and jingoism. His concern over the growing popularity of the Nazi Party escalates when he meets Adolf Hitler, the group's fanatical leader, and the members of his inner circle. So this could go one of two ways to me. It could be kind of like a Forrest Gump thing. I feel like in reviews that I've seen of Dragon's Teeth, it gets a lot of credit for being anti-Nazi. However, it was published in 1942. So it's already after Pearl Harbor, and the U.S. is in the war at this point. So part of me feels like, sure, Upton Sinclair deserves credit for a lot of things, but part of me feels like, is this America patting ourselves on the back after the fact a little bit, or is it actually going to be relevant? And again, I'm talking wildly out of turn because I have not done a whole lot of research about this book. This is just me looking through all of the books, and oddly enough, the Lanny Budd books come up as discounts on ebooks a lot. I don't know why that is. But anyway, so I don't really know what to think of that one. And I feel like it could end up being one that I really don't like, but it could end up being good. Maybe it has a lot of really interesting things to say, and there's no denying the U.S. was late to really get into World War II. So maybe it is something that maybe he has a lot of interesting points that did change a lot of minds and do a lot of good in the world. I don't know. We'll find out. So anyway, that is my project. I will also link the Wikipedia page with all of the Pulitzer Prize winners down below. If you want to give it a peruse and tell me which ones you really enjoy, I would like to hear that because it'll give me something to look forward to. If there are any that you really don't like, tell me that as well, so I can kind of look out as I get closer to them. And I think this is going to be a fun project. I'm really excited about it. So, thank you for taking the time to watch this. As always, I really appreciate it. And I will be back again. Until then, happy reading.